Hi there, everybody. My name is Gavin Walsh, and I've written a trilogy of books called Shamrock 165 under the pseudonym Gawain Kimrag, which is the Welsh translation of my name. And my name originates in Welsh, some coincidence with this crash. In any event, as some of you have been following, I've spent the past almost 13 years trying to resolve the riddle of Ireland's and Aer Lingus' first ever air crash. That's the Irish nation's ever first fatal air crash. And came to some astounding conclusions. It took quite a while to uncover the truth, but basically everything that was told was basically lies. It was a phenomenal cover-up. The rot started at the first round of inquests in Caernarvon on Monday, the 14th of January, which was 4 days after the crash. And from there, it proceeded and got worse and worse and worse. The end result was that the entire investigative process into the St. Kevin was a complete sham. It was run by a senior Irish civil servant, who in turn had a patsy brought up from London, an Irishman who was a member of the AIB Accident Investigation Bureau, but it was basically run by a senior Irish civil servant. They got the investigative process the way they wanted it to go, and those findings of that were then presented to an inquiry. And the inquiry was an official British government public inquiry, and it was every bit as bad as the investigative process. It was also a complete and utter sham, built on one thing, which was to safeguard the airline and to ensure that the airline was not found at fault. What it came down to was a point of law in the Warsaw Aviation Act, combined with the Ireland's Fatal Aviation Act of 1935, which was brought in the year before Aer Lingus were founded, deliberately for the fact that a national airline was been set up. And there was a clause within that if the airline was not held liable, all damages were capped at £3,000 per death. It was actually 2,997, and there's a slight complexity as to the anomaly in the £3 or the £2 in shillings and pennies. And that's covered in the story. In any event, that does not concern us. What concerns us was that they had to keep the limitation of these damages at that 3,000 figure, purely because anything that was provable against the airline, the claims were unlimited. So you would have families going in and suing for the breadwinner lost and the children up to the age of 18, and the litigation would have been off the Richter scale. And at that point, Aer Lingus was in woeful financial difficulty. And this is evidenced in the first, I believe, 56 pages of the book across several chapters, which show not only the dire finances the airline had been in since pretty much since its inception, but specifically since the end of the war. They also show, it also details how the airline reduced costs to try and combat those losses in order to satisfy the politicians on both sides of the Irish Sea that were feeding the airline. And they were at the expenses of taxpayers on both sides, because in April 1946, Aer Lingus was a 60% Irish company and a 40% British company. So people on both sides had a lot to lose if this accident went against them. So what you had was a sham of an investigative process, whose findings were then presented to an inquiry. You had a double sham there. And then you can see from some of the documents I've got my hands on that some of the assessors, at some times, two of the assessors agreed or disagreed with some of the investigative process. And thankfully, all these guys left a monster paper trail after them. And without that paper trail, I would not be confident in making my claims. And that paper trail it is phenomenal. It's actually over 1,064 documents. I believe there was only 2 documents I did not ascertain, and they came from a multitude of sources. There were a whole lot more documents that I will never get that were willfully destroyed, but these were ones that were kept back by certain individuals who suspected foul play. Everyone who perpetrated this act did so at the expense of the captain, whose reputation was ruined on point 7 in the inquiry, which accused him of gross misnavigational errors, which he never did. And that is proven conclusively. And the way that they did that was they retrospectively put Captain Keohane off course. Fantastical, but all provable. everybody everyone who did this to Captain Cuhan, and indeed the victims who are still in a plane, in a bog, in a mountaintop in Wales, are all named. And what I say to anyone that's unhappy with that is, sue me. I have all the documents to back up what I'm saying, and all the witness statements that were all destroyed. And there are people still living that witnessed what happened. And thankfully, they have attended all of our launches and been re-interviewed. The video you're about to show is me at the launch of Volume 3. And it's basically unedited. I cut out excess bits. And there's a lot of chyrons used, and I apologize for the overabundance of them, but this is to protect me from litigation. And whilst we're extremely proud of our national airline, Aer Lingus, today, and I mean that genuinely, I literally have to protect myself from a $40 billion airline, which is what Aer Lingus had become. And I've also to protect myself from two governments on both sides of the Irish Sea, albeit from 1952. Now, I don't want to give away too much, but I will say that this video was going to be a whole lot more confrontational. But thankfully, to correspondence that I have received last December 1st, I believe there is great hope to overturn point 7 of the British government's public inquiry into the St. Kevin. And beyond that, I don't want to say any further at this point. I hope you enjoyed the read. And by the way, the book is not yet publicly released. We had a private launch in the Penny Gurrid Hotel last September 30. But the book there is a limited pre-launch edition available from Liber Bookshop, and I'll put the web address and the telephone number underneath the screen. And Brian, the proprietor, has books, currently has some limited books, and they're available. And that's about it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Okay. Oh, finally, whilst it is time to say goodbye to 13 years' work, the next chapter looms. And the next chapter is, of course, the elimination of point 7 of the British government's inquiry into saying that the airplane was off course. The St. Kevin airliner was never inadvertently off course. Okay. Thanks, guys. Happy Christmas. Cheers. It's a massive book. It's 620 pages, which is double the size of Volume 2 and almost double the size of Volume 1, which itself was big. But it's the final story. It's the end of the trail for the St. Kevin project. It's the last 11 biographies, which is really eight biographies, because you have a family of 3 and a couple. But it's the last of the stories of the people who died on the St. Kevin. And it's initially what I started out to do. I don't know how I got into this or how it took over. My mind has been hijacked for the last 12 years and 3 months, and I do not say that facetiously, that is a fact. But I set out to tell the stories of these people, and the detail I got into, my mind is obsessive at the best of times, but I became obsessed with them in their own individual lives, and I almost feel like I've actually lived some of their lives. But I tracked down everything I could, and it just became a complete obsession, for want of a better word, but it was also a passion, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, even the hard times, and there were very hard times, especially coming to the end. It was very, very rough. But we got there, and today we're at the end of the trail. But something bizarre happened exactly 11 years ago. On the Friday, the 5th of October 2012, a man got me into a vault where I got to see files that should never have been seen by anybody. And from that, I found a way to get more of those files, and on my own bat, and more files and more files. And then when I would show them to certain people who I would trust within the business, they would say, well, I know somebody has more. And that file process became a staggering 1,064 pages, many of which are printed in here to save me from any litigation that may come at me from either the bodies that beat today that investigate air crashes. And basically, everything about the St. Kevin inquiry was a sham. It was an investigation that they needed to go a certain way, or the airline would be on the hook for, in those times, tens or hundreds of thousands of euros or pounds. As it was, they invoked the Warsaw Clause, the Warsaw 1929 Act, that if the airline were not held directly responsible, the maximum payout for any one death to all of the people who may claim was £2,997. Now that's detailed in its own chapter, how that figure was evaluated.
But for that to happen, the investigators had to retrospectively, after the fact, put Jimmy Keohane off course. I know that sounds fantastical, but they did it. They didn't do a good job that someone could go back and undo it on them. And there's 215 pages in this book that completely annihilate the British government's inquiry into the St. Kevin crash. The inquiry was run by an Irishman, no surprise there, and he in turn was directed. But he was a puppet of an Irishman in Ireland, who was the lead crash investigator in Ireland. So basically, the Irish powers that be had carte blanche on how they wanted the investigation to go. And that commencement started right back in Kilnarvan, right at the coroner's court. It started, even though the coroner investigates cause of death and he's not an air crash investigator, Nicky Laker, who was the senior captain at Aer Lingus, who lost his life as a passenger on the St. Kevin, but we can almost say he was in the cockpit at the time of crisis. Nicky Laker's brother, a very clever man called Victor Laker, who was a chartered accountant and auditor down in London, was extraordinarily suspicious as to this route they had been flying. And at the coroner's court, the Monday after the crash, he started asking a lot of very, very serious questions. For instance, did the plane clip another mountain before it was out of control? Was the plane on fire? He started asking the most bizarre questions. So they had to shut him down. And they shut him down, and you'll see here, they sent the police out to arrest him accuse him of a false theft accusation against Aer Lingus. So there was a lot of dirty tricks used and tactics used, but it was an semblance of the both governments, the British government more or less being passive about it and turning a blind eye to what the result was needed. And you must also remember that British Airways' predecessor was BAA and BOAC, British European Airways and British Overseas Aircraft Corporation, and they owned 40% of Aer Lingus. So any potential of claims against them would be held 40% liable for. So they got the outcome they wanted at the inquiry, which was that point 7 said that the airplane was lost due to the captain committing gross misnavigational errors. That never happened. Then they went on in point number 11 to say that no person or parties could be held responsible for the crash. So they give it with one hand and take it away with the other. But basically, a senior Aer Lingus captain and a war hero who had courageously fought in World War II, an Irishman, put his life on the line with the RAF, has been left in that plane to cover the true cause of the crash. Jimmy Keohane was never inadvertently lost. He had actually gone out to sea, picked up the Nevin radio beacon, and for some reason that we would likely never know, turned back. I suspect he turned back because of horrendous icing. And Aer Lingus, all airlines had a very strict rule. If you get into icing and you're coming to cross the sea, do not cross the sea, because if it gets worse, you know where to go. So that is what I suspect, because the chances of 2 or 3 things happening simultaneously are minute. But when they turned back, they encountered horrendous tailwinds. And something went wrong, and we would, unless there's minute investigations or retrospective exhumation of the plane, we will never know what that was. But something caused them to turn back, and thanks to Gwinnett Roberts here and a lot of other people, I have been going around interviewing people from 2011, and the stories that the people were telling me did not match what the inquiry had arrived at. In fact, they completely and diametrically opposed each other. So this troubled me. But to see these documents, and they completely shredded what the inquiry had said. 20 people had witnessed it, and none of them were brought to the inquiry. In fact, they were all suppressed. So a lot of skullduggery and what have you was committed for the airline to get the outcome that they wanted. And once they got the outcome, the cases of litigation did commence, but only families with 3 children or more got the full £3,000, and you had to sue in the court, and they fought you in court to get that compensation. But the argument that I present in the book, in the first section of the book, is that had the case gone against Aer Lingus, they could well have gone out of business. They had been losing hundreds of thousands of pounds per annum. That's back in 1940s money, all the way through to 1952. And this case, had it gone against them, I have no doubt would have sank them. And people that might find that preposterous, how could a national airline go out of business over an accident? Well, it happened to much bigger parties since then, like ValueJet, Pan Am and TWA. They were all in financial difficulties. Anytime any of them had a crash, they were gone within a year or 2. So the argument I present is that Aer Lingus would have been in horrendous financial trouble had this had the case not gone against them. They got the desired outcome. The cases proceeded into court. The families that did sue got the £3,000, and we still have Aer Lingus today, which is fantastic. And I need to get this across. We're very proud, as an Irish person, we're extremely proud of Aer Lingus. They have a zero fatality since the jet age. So it is not the Aer Lingus of today that did this to the people of yesterday. It was the Aer Lingus of the day that did it. And all of them in the 215 pages of the deconstruction are named, and I have no fear in naming them. And more importantly, including the man who did it, the people who sent him out to do it are named. Thanks to documents I got that clearly show who's to talk to who and who's not. And you will actually see documents in here where the police here in Wales listed all the witnesses, and you'll see another document where their names are literally removed. In other words, they're not to be brought to any of the inquiry phases. And a lot of skullduggery. And the end result is that, in my opinion, the airliner had to remain in the bog with the vast majority of the people in it to protect or cover the true cause of the crash. And that is pretty much the findings of the entire story. But I just never knew it would take 12 years to get there. Finally, people like one aunt who saw the plane in flames as a child finally gets to tell what she witnessed, even though they were told what they saw they never saw. Do you want to speak, one aunt? Well, one aunt,
I'd just like to say that I had the job convincing you that the plane was on fire before it's...
That's because I am very almost paranoid about conspiracy theories. And I had to root to the very end to... You are correct, I will not deny I did not believe you initially. And then when I interviewed your sister, her story was identical. And then when I got the statement, and then I got newspaper reports where pressmen were on the ground that night, and everyone was saying, I saw the plane go down in flames, and I saw planes spurting out, including your neighbour William Williams. And then it became evident that several people saw and heard the plane in its dying moments. So what we do know is the plane did check Nevin. They always said that Captain Cahan, for some bizarre reason, told a lie. Why would he tell a lie unless he knows he's going to crash and he doesn't want the outcome? It makes no sense. So he checked Nevin, which is out on the Pukeli, what's that peninsula? Quinn Peninsula. He checked there, and then he cleared the coast, and for some reason turned back. All the houses in Rue 2, am I saying it right? All vibrating. Everybody came out. What the hell is this? Everyone in the power station came out, and one of them in the power station was that clever. He counted the seconds and he worked out the speed of sound and his distance, and the plane did its loop, and then boom. The critical thing that I'm very happy to stand over here, and I just use basic trigonometry to do it, and we put it into a funny chapter, and it goes back to the people of Nant, and it's called the Land of the Giants, and it basically evidences that for any of them to have seen the plane impact in the bog, which is what Aer Lingus and the investigators claimed it did, they would have to have been 1,641 feet and some of the inches tall. Because as any of you know today, you're up there, it's a bowl. And it's protected by the winch rehead, the cog. Bulkhead. There's this cog around it. So what the witnesses actually saw was the plane exploding mid-air. And because one of the witnesses, Lucy Williams, first cousin of William Owen Williams down in because of what she did not see, we were able to narrow that bandwidth down. And I believe I worked out the plane exploded approximately somewhere between 1,250 and 1,650 feet above the ground, above the top of the mountain. So the plane was going around in huge agonizing circles. Now, when Ant actually witnessed the plane on fire, I just think about that, in flight, a big arc across the sky, her and her sister, they witnessed it. And it has tormented her ever since. And I know, and I wish to publicly apologize to you for disbelieving you. But you have to remember, I had to work off the fact that memories from people 60 plus years later can change, and things kind of happen in between. And I basically am so anti-conspiratorialist that I had to rule out everything before I could rule anything in. And I do apologize to you for what you saw. You 100% saw. Apology taken? Accepted? Yes. You should keep throwing up me. You didn't believe me.
I'm really intrigued by what you revealed to me for the first time about the corporate ownership and investment.
Yeah.
Investment. the interest that was on this side of the water, that BOAC and BEA?
BOAC had a 10% sharing, which they got rid of immediately after the crash.
Is that right?
BEA had a 30%.
And was that there from the founding
No,
of Aer
no.
Lingus?
What happened? What happened in April of 1946? Everything with the Atlantic was going. They knew the Atlantic was going to be a huge.
Post-war.
Yeah, immediately post-war. They knew the Atlantic was going to be a big business, and it's a bit complicated. But Aer Lingus set up a sister company called Aer Lingus, and this is a 4-page spread in this book. And they bought these 5 jumbo jets of the day, which were Constellations, and it became a very harrowing issue between the two parties. Fianna Fáil were in power, and Fine Gael's election manifesto in the next election was, if we get in, we're going to cancel this nonsense, this massive, that's going to cost the taxpayer millions. In the meantime, Fianna Fáil, knowing the election was coming, assumed that people would back them, and they rushed out and bought these 5 humongous planes. The British government at the time were in negotiation with Ireland because everybody wanted Shannon. If you topped the tanks at Shannon, you could get all the way to Newfoundland. So the British government did a deal with the Irish government that Aer Lingus would be the sole flyer in and out of the 26 counties. Okay? Aer Lingus, the Irish government would relinquish rights to all British, to BOAC, to fly in and out of Shannon to get to America. This was the part of the deal. Aer Lingus then would be guaranteed what I just told you, and Aer Lingus then threw in a caveat where they wanted Manchester, which they have to this day. Believe it or not, you can fly Aer Lingus from Manchester direct to America, and they're opening more routes by the month. But the Aer Lingus then asked for a routing out of Manchester to other cities in Europe, which they gave them as part of this deal. In return, and this is critical, not just the 40%, BOAC's chairman was on the board of Aer Lingus, and BEA's chairman was on the board of Aer Lingus, and BEA selected another one. So on the board of 7 of Aer Lingus, 3 were from British aviation officials. But this next part is the critical part. Lord Sholto Douglas was Churchill's right-hand man. He was chairman of BEA at the time of the crash and at the time of the inquiry. So Sholto Douglas couldn't have a guy turn back up the platform in Houston, a Welsh farmer coming down to speak Welsh and give evidence. He was sent back on the platform. So it was a complete cover-up, but they had the people in power to do it. And it didn't even take phone calls. It was just like almost telepathic, wink, wink, we can't go down for this. And the important point to understand here is Sholto Douglas, the biggest player in British aviation at that time, was on the board of Aer Lingus at the time of the crash and at the time of the inquiry. Ironically, 11 months before the crash, he came to Aer Lingus, and this is detailed in here, and he pleaded with them to upgrade their aircraft. Because Aer Lingus were rapidly getting rid of the radio operators to save money. And he pleaded with them to take the device, which is called a G-fix, from the rear of the plane and put it in the cockpit. And he flew over in the world's first modified plane called a Pioneer, which is a DC-3 modified with a new cockpit. And Aer Lingus declined the offer. Had they had it that night, who knows? So it took a whole sequence of coincidences to go against that. But on the night of the crash, 6 chief people in Aer Lingus were over here before anyone from Britain was even known of the crash. An internal memo I have clearly shows that the British Ministry of Civil Aviation was told about the crash at 2:30 in the morning. They then got a patsy, and I have no problem calling him a patsy. He was a patsy of theirs. They put a patsy on a train up from London, and he was assigned as the lead investigator into the crash. His name was John Duggan, an Irishman. And who collected him off the train station? Richard O'Sullivan from Dublin, who was Ireland's chief. And you can imagine the phone conversation in that car. We can't go down for this. I literally say come down to those words. And from there, Richard O'Sullivan may as well have ran the entire crash investigation. Now, Richard O'Sullivan is a very illustrious character in Irish aviation. He was the guy who investigated Tusker Rock. 3 times as many people killed. 46 witness statements, all disappeared. 46. And he investigated that. He gave an interview a month shy of 88, and I quote this in the book. And he's asked, and he said, the guy says to him, will we ever get to the bottom of these crashes? And you can see he's a man way down with a conscience. He says, never is a long time. And then he said these words twice in a row. And you'll get it on the RT player. Things do turn up. Things do turn up. But right now today you saw what's turning up on the top of the valve. The plane is back giving itself up again. There's metal everywhere. Some of it is all here. This is, you'll have to help me with this then. What is that?
It's a cylinder.
A
cylinder
twin what?
From a Pratt & Whitney twin was.
That's the cylinder out of the St. Kevin.
Oh my gosh.
And it's dead heavy. They're all coming up from the bog. Tracy, I think you explained why there was 3 super dry months.
Yeah, we had, well, for the last 2 years, we've had long periods of really dry weather.
I was stunned today at the amount of
and then
metal.
lots of rain, then the rain, so it's kind of,
Yeah.
you know,
Regurgitating.
back up. Yeah.
It's everywhere. The metal is everywhere on the bog.
Yeah.
Big chunks like that. John Roberts gave me a great gift way back in the year before John left us. And I really didn't want to take it on, but he said, you have such a passion for it, you have to have it. So this is a piece of it as well. And the verdant green is here, as you can see.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's a lot of stuff inscribed on it here. Who's after coming in? Gwyn Ross Jones. Hello, Gwyn Ross.
Hello, Gwen. Good to see you.
Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you.
You're all right. Gwyn Ross Jones lived on the other side of the mountain, and he audibly witnessed the aircraft in distress. He also had the uniqueness of going up to the crash site at 14 years of age on the Sunday after the crash, and he saw the last body being retrieved. He was been told, "Shun, go away," and one of the RAF men, who knows, it might have been your father, Karen, but one of the RAF men said, "What harm is he? Leave him and stay back." And he said that you said that when they exhumed it, they showed such great respect. And that's Gwyn Ross. Great guy.
Sorry, Gary, I'm a bit deaf.
That's okay.
I haven't been able to call a Pesci in the last couple of years.
Okay.
I broke my back.
Gwyn Ross goes up and talks to them.
That's good.
We were up there today. It was horrific. Horrific.
Rain. All the way there. Rain.
Mud everywhere, slipping and sliding. Sorry?
Yes.
Now I wanted, just while we're on the subject, I want to tell you something about Gwyn Ross, and this is in the story. In 1955, Gwyn Ross was up fox hunting. He was 17, so it's 3 years later, and he saw a group of people there at the crash site, and he went over to talk to them, and one of them was the captain's widow, and she got very upset. And she asked Gwyn Ross, did he know anything? Now you're in this story. Did he know anything of it? And Gwyn Ross told her that the plane had gone around in 2 huge circles. And the woman, 2 or 3 big circles, and the woman, Mrs. Cuhan, got very upset and asked him, how sure are you? And he said, everybody knows this. And she went down into the village that day and started, not the village, but Nantwinant in the area, and started knocking on doors and asking questions. She got the same answers. She was completely distraught. She then knew that everything that had been told at the inquiry was hogwash. Everything, the whole thing was a sham. And that's detailed in the story. She just became very distraught over it. So. How they thought that they could get away with it, but they did, and they got away with it for 72 years almost.
Without you, they would have got away with it.
For all eternity. For all eternity. We did it. And if nobody believes me, I really, frankly, don't care. But I do intend to present this to the Irish Airline Pilots Association, today's Irish Airline Pilots Association. Given that the 3 pilots on board, one was deadheading, but a senior captain in Aer Lingus, given that they were all valid, paid up members of their organisation, let's see what they have to say about it. Let's see what they have to do about it.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Let's see, will the interest of the dollar again outweigh the interest of humanity? Let's see will it come to that. And as I say, I will not stop until I get point 7 removed from the British government inquiry.
Oh, brilliant.
So,
Good. Well done.